You can use the term secondary trauma, secondary traumatic stress, vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue. Whatever term you use, trauma is the key word. And why are we talking about secondary trauma today? We're talking about this because every single person who works in the court system is at high risk of experiencing secondary trauma. And you might say, oh my, why am I involved in this field then if I'm at high risk? Please know I am at high risk. Medical doctors are at high risk. Nurses are at high risk. Anybody who serves, persons who have been traumatized would experience at some point secondary trauma. The reason why we're doing this is we want you to know that you can take care of yourself in the midst of that experience. So because you're at high risk, we want you to be prepared. And once you are prepared, you can come out of this unscathed. And you can refresh yourself and get back in there and do the work that you were required to do. So what is secondary trauma? Secondary trauma is an experience that you have that overwhelms the system once you deal with people who are traumatized. And if we look at the court is a place where people do not come to court because they're happy. They do not come to court because they're full of joy. They come to court because something went amiss. And because something went amiss, they have an experience that is usually negative. They're coming to the court for redress. And so you are going to be open to their stories. They're coming with stories of pain. They're coming with stories of anger. They're coming with stories of sadness and loss. They have been traumatized. And simply because we are human, and we have to listen to the stories of human beings who've been hurt, or maybe they've been ordered there because they hurt someone, we are going to experience the secondary symptoms because of proximity to their pain. So we want to be prepared. And so the issue is, how can we be prepared to deal with secondary trauma? So let's talk about some of the symptoms of secondary trauma. I know you've heard about this thing called fight, flight, or freeze. And so when we experience these symptoms that overwhelm our system, our body goes into either run from it, that's the flight, or stand up and fight it, or you just freeze. And when we experience those kinds of symptoms, what starts to happen is that there is what we call hyper-arousal. Our system gets aroused, all right? We can also find ourselves sometimes having nightmares because we've heard of a traumatic story. Some people just want to isolate. Leave me well alone. And others, they want to rush to the comfort of others because of what they've experienced. So there are all sorts of reactions that people have. So let's use a little example to talk about how real this thing is, called secondary trauma. Not too long ago, there was the very, very sad case of a 5-year-old who was raped by an adult. And because of the process that rape takes on your body, that child did not survive. The child died. And so what happened is the police officers involved in the case, they experienced secondary trauma. The court officers, the court staff who heard about the case, they experienced secondary trauma. The judicial officer dealing with the case experienced secondary trauma. The medical personnel, the prison officers, everybody left that case, especially those who saw the body of the child. They experienced trauma. And those who were parents, who were involved, oh my. Sometimes there wasn't a dry eye in that courtroom. And so, when you go through that kind of experience, you have to know how to take care of yourself. Once you're at high risk, you have to take care of yourself. And therefore, those of us in this part of the world called the Caribbean, yes, we are in tiny island states. We rub up against each other, bounce up against each other. We don't have the privilege of some of those with a large land mass, and they can move away from the situation. You go to the grocery, you go to the bank, you go to wherever. You have to involve yourself with people. So it is on us. I have a sister who likes to use the word behooves. It behooves us to be able to find a way to take care of ourselves just because of size. Now, if we talk about Guyana, and I know Guyana, you're involved, you have the large landmass, but you still have a small group of people, just like us, to interact with. So we all at heightened risk because of how tiny our populations are. All right? So what can you do? You want to watch this thing called burnout. You want to watch that. You know, burnout, that place we get to of extreme exhaustion, and we start to shut down, and we're working on fumes, and it becomes difficult to manage ourselves. With burnout, you can have extremes of emotion. You can have extremes of reaction. Little things annoy you and frustrate you, and your level of anger, as we like to say, on my last nerve, you start to get. And we start to react in ways that if we are not burnt out, we would not. Yes? So you want to watch that. And what can we do? I want to recommend some things, first of all, for us in our part of the world to do. And that is, I think, every court must have debriefing sessions. Once you see you have had to deal with a case, a situation, a matter that has high traumatic risk, it's important that as the matter is going on, or as you have to deal with that matter, that you have debriefing sessions. That's my wish. That's my wish as a clinical psychologist and a service provider to the court for many, many years. Remember, I'm not telling you all the years, so you would know my age, right? For many years. The thing that is important, we want to preempt it. We don't want to be sitting ducks in secondary trauma. We want to preempt it. So it's important that all the parties involved, you come and you have a debriefing session. And how are debriefing sessions run? Psychologists do it all the time. And so you can have a professional, like a psychologist, who will come in to debrief the team based on the experience. And when we say the team, we don't only mean the judicial officer, the wider court, all who support the court, to debrief. Debriefing allows you to understand your shared humanity. Debriefing allows you to ventilate. Debriefing allows you to bring down that heightened sense of arousal. So I would always be an advocate for a debriefing process. The other thing I'd like to suggest to us Caribbean folk, those in this part of the world, Guyanese, don't worry, I'm calling you Caribbean folk too, all right? Those in this part of the world. What I think would be fantastic as well is that every jurisdiction, every court system would have an employee assistance program, so that there is a support network surrounding those of you who are working so hard in the court. You are upholding law and order in the land. We love you, we need you. And so, if you have that support, the only problem is in our part of the world, those of us who are psychologists, etc., we have a high form of quackery in our profession because many times it's not regulated. So those of us in Trinidad and Tobago, for example, we're working hard to get it regulated. But once you could find those people who are truly qualified, because many are quacks, hear me carefully. I don't want you to be re-traumatized because you're sitting with a quack, all right? So when you find the well-qualified people, they can provide you, if you are starting to have those intrusive thoughts, the nightmares, you are helicopter parenting your children because you heard something, and therefore you're calling up the children all the time to make sure they are okay. The fact that we live in these tiny populations and you're dealing with criminal elements as well who might seek to harm you and your family, all these things. If you have an EAP established, you can quickly get help so that you can be supported with secondary trauma. But there are some things you can also do on your own. And so we want to be able to share those with you. And one would be when you have seen, heard a traumatic event, and you know of the susceptibility to secondary trauma, you can do things like keep moving. And let me explain what I mean by keep moving. You see those nice endorphins that happen through exercise and taking a walk, etc. It helps you to cleanse your system. So one would be exercise. Another one will be don't isolate. Oh, please don't isolate. You would feel like isolating, but you have to fight it. It is always better to get someone you trust to be able to talk about what you feel. Now, that's ticklish because so much of what happens in the court, etc., requires you to be confidential and to be private, etc., with information. So you're not going to give details of the case. What you're talking about is the impact on you. I had to listen to a lot of traumatic things this morning. You could just say that, and I need to talk to somebody. So I would always advise court officers, court staff, judicial officers, whomever works in the court system, always have a buddy. And particularly judicial officers I'm speaking to here, because you are accustomed being solo, working on whatever. As you adjudicate matters, as you sit on the bench, the issue is for you to be completely objective, balance those scales, so you're accustomed doing things on your own. Find another judicial officer to be your buddy. Somebody who understands the role and you can trust, so that you all will support each other. You would be surprised how that really helps strengthen your psyche when you need it. The last thing I would say, because there's a lot I could say on secondary trauma, would be this issue of this symptom. I wanted to save the symptom for last. Secondary trauma can cause you to second guess yourself. And judicial officers in particular, that is something they dread. You want to be able to make a judgment. That's what you are therefore studied for, hired to do on behalf of the state. And so, therefore, no, judges are independent of the state, on behalf of all who come before you. Therefore, it is important, the support network, because you don't want to doubt yourself. Remember, you are susceptible to secondary trauma, not only by who comes before you, but what happens to your colleagues. I remember there was a judicial officer who was dragged through the mud in the press, and all their colleagues felt it, felt that pain and humiliation that judicial officer went through. I know of judicial officers who have had the criminal element come to their homes, families, and they've been traumatized by that. And that has an impact on you. And so people, because they were traumatized by the trauma of their colleague, they started to doubt themselves. They started to shut down. They started to become hyper-vigilant. You see the importance of why you need to put things in place? So it is so important that you have a network of support around you so that you can do that noble job that has been required of you. And so as we celebrate the UN Declaration of Judicial Wellness, I do hope that what I had to share today about secondary trauma would be an absolute blessing to you and strengthen you as you journey forward.